What's going on, everybody? I'm Master Sergeant Heinrichs, the 28th Bomb Wing Career Assistance Advisor, and today we're going to talk about NCORP Retraining. I really want to talk to you guys not just about NCORP, right, but what do you really want to be when you grow up? So being a career advisor has opened a lot of doors for me as far as what goes on after the military. A small piece of it did, but I kind of took that and ran 100,000 miles an hour with it and created a what is going to be a talent management agency called VETA, Veteran Employment Transition Alliance, and it's grown to 27.5 thousand people. So that is my retirement deal, right? But with that comes, you guys are in a unique situation. What I've really learned is how to set yourself up for success post-military, and how to network. Understand that networking is 85% of how you get a job. It's not going to Indeed or monsterjobs.com and applying for something, because then you are basically competing against hundreds of other people. Whereas if you network and you have a LinkedIn account, they already know who you are. They say, hey, this job's coming open, and they say, oh, hey, this person's separating from the military in a year, and then you still have to send over a resume, but it is nothing compared to going in blind, right? Now, the reason I'm saying that is to get to this. So 2 years ago, when I became the CAA, the 1 Alpha career fields, in 1 uniform as well, totally undermanned, right? They were totally undermanned, and we were pulling people from all over the place to help backfill the 1 Alpha, 1 uniform positions. Well, Air Force did what Air Force does, and they recruited too many people, and here we are. So it all depends on our annual budget. So if our annual budget is less than what it was the previous year or the previous 2 years, what's going to happen is that they're not going to have the money, the DoD, right, is not going to have the same amount of money to pay for people. So every single one of us is tied to a position number on a unit manning document, right? And that is how, when you add all of that stuff up, that is how you can figure out how much personnel costs in the military, right? And it's not just Air Force, that's DoD wide. So what happens is, since we don't have enough money, right, but also you guys are at 125% manning, was the last I heard from your senior. So that tells us that we have 25% of this AFSC that can be better utilized in different career fields. So if you own a business and you have 7 people in your marketing department, but you only need 2 people in your marketing department, does it make sense to continue to pay the other 5 people to do marketing, right? It doesn't. There's no ROI on that. And that's kind of big picture, like no BS, where the Air Force is coming with this, right? So what they do is they have what's called NCORP, which is the NCO Retraining program. Every year around this time, usually it's the first week of August, but there's a new retraining advisory that drops. So the retraining advisory is a compilation of all the AFSCs, all the career field managers across the Air Force get together, and they say, I have too many people or I don't have enough. And that's what creates your objective in versus your objective out requirements. So here's a printed one here, and for the 1 uniform, for staff sergeants, you guys have, staff sergeant is 100, right? So your objective out requirement for staff is 100. Tech is 60, and master is 26. So basically, and this isn't just Ellsworth, this is the whole 1U, right? So what that means is that you are overmanned by 100 people. We'll just talk staff sergeants, right? You're overmanned by 100 people. So when NCORP comes along, what they want you to do is to volunteer, right? Because there's 3 phases. Phase 1 is this list drops, and you see these massive numbers, and 100 of you, the Air Force is hoping, will voluntarily apply to retrain into a different AFSC. Now I'll get to the point when I talked about VETA, because it'll come full circle, right? And it's not just VETA, it's all programs. But if the Air Force doesn't get all the volunteers they need, then it goes to phase 2, and that's when you get voluntold, So that is when it is super important. So, and before we get to phase 3, let's just talk about the voluntold part. So, gosh, what was it, like 10, 11 years ago now, I think, vehicle maintenance, I saw this firsthand. They had way too many tech sergeants, and they did not apply for phase 1 retraining, right? Because they were thinking, it's not going to happen to me. It doesn't happen to me. It's like a car crash, right? It'll never happen to me. And then it happens, and you're like, well, crap, right? So here at Ellsworth Air Force Base, every single tech sergeant was involuntarily retrained. And some went to MEO, some went to different AFSCs, right? And you have options if you get involuntarily retrained. So don't think you don't. You still get up to 5 AFSCs, but some of that's going to depend on your ASVAB score, right? And your records, or even your security clearance, which all of you should. Do you guys have a TS? All of you guys, we'll even go full circle whenever it comes for after your military life with your TS. But so in a nutshell, there's 100 people that got to go. If 100 people don't apply, if 40 apply, the Air Force is going to find 60 people to involuntarily retrain. So here's where it comes to you guys, and you should reflect. What do you want to be when you grow up? I sit here before you at 19 years of service. Today, actually, is my 19-year mark. That went by so damn fast. It's insane how fast it's gone by. And the same thing is going to happen to you, whether you do your 4, 6, maybe you want to separate at 12, 20, or 30. You're going to blink, life happens, and the next thing you know, it's on to your next chapter. So it's super important for you guys to plan what it is that you want to do when you grow up right now and start attacking that plan. So what I recommend is get your bachelor's and your master's, all your credentials, certifications into something that relates to what you want to do when you separate or retire from the military. That is rock solid advice. So now you are in a unique position to where if you want to be a sensor operator and like this is your dream and it is a no BS, like this is absolutely what I want to do, take the chance, right? Just take the chance. But if it's not, even if there's a shadow of a doubt to where you're like, I don't want to be a sensor operator, I want to do IT, I want to do robotics, I want to be a handyman, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Retrain into an AFSC that meets that. So what's going to happen is that you will now have the experience by the time you separate or retire, and you're going to have the education, and then you plug into all your resources that are available to you, like VEDA. You know, you go to TAPS. TAPS, you're going to get overloaded with information. You're probably going to forget what happened after TAPS. But if you go online, there are just a tremendous amount of resources. So there are tens of thousands of companies across the nation that have veteran hiring initiatives. And I think it's important for you to know that. So not up until recently with the term skill bridge, right? Does everybody know what skill bridge is? That has never really been a popular thing up until a couple, 2-3 years ago. The Army had what's called the Career Skills Program, which is basically the same thing as Skill Bridge, right? So the DoD kind of threw this Skill Bridge label on it and it made it popular. But there have always been apprenticeship programs. As a matter of fact, the Department of Labor had apprenticeship programs in the 1930s for transitioning service members. And there are also Department of Labor initiatives to hire veterans and military spouses. So the information is out there and the opportunity is unbelievable. But the thing about information is that when I say it's out there, right, it's not all structured and pretty, like you go to EPUBs and trying to find an AFI, you know, you go departmental and then Air Force or whatever, right, and then AFI, medical, dental. It's not like it's literally on all corners of the internet and on the freaking deep web, it seems like, you know what I mean? So what I've done with VEDA is I have consolidated all of that information. I've created a skill bridge checklist, and there are, like I said, 27.5 thousand people in that group with probably more than 10,000 that have already made the transition that want to help you, right? So you can go in that Facebook group and ask any question. There's no such thing as a dumb question, right? And I would recommend doing that. What does a day in the life look like in IT? What does a day in the life look like at cyber? What is a day in the life as a construction business owner? Whatever, right? And somebody is going to reply back to you, and you'll find a mentor, right? And hopefully they're going to get you on the right track to go to a website called Veterati. And Veterati is a group of veterans, right, that have all served in the military, that have transitioned out. Now they're business owners, now they are mentors, now they are you name it. Same thing with American Corporate Partners, but I think Veterati is better just because it's all veterans. And they will mentor you exactly what you need to do to fulfill your dream. So what do I mean when I say fulfill your dream? If you go to work and you're working 8 or 9 hours a day and it doesn't feel like work, you're doing it right. Right? And I'll tell you right now, I lost my mom last August. She was 56. She died of lung cancer. I just lost my uncle. I lost one of my best friends last year. He was 44, just retired from the military, POL. And I'm telling you, it's put things in perspective for me that life is too damn short to be doing stuff that you don't want to do, right? Because you can serve your 20 years, but if you hated the entire time, not only is it going to be bad for everybody around you, right? But it's also going to be bad for you because you just wasted 20 years of doing something that doesn't make you happy or chasing a paycheck. And you can chase a paycheck doing something that makes you happy. You don't have to do a certain AFSC. So now is a perfect turning point for you guys to where if the Air Force says I need to I need 100 people to retrain into a different AFSC, you go to the online Retraining Advisory and you find AFSCs that have objective ends with numbers and you apply for those. So this is a great portion of the video to where I'm actually going to leave a link in the description below. I have a video that I filmed last summer. It's just me talking about how to retrain, and it will step you through the entire process. And I will also give you my personal cell. So after you watch the video, that's going to answer 95% of your questions on how the retraining process works, what you need to do, tricks, tips, etc. And the remaining 5%, you can shoot me a text 24/7, 365. I'll even text him after I'm retired from the military as long as I'm still relevant and the information hasn't changed because I just care, right? So with that said, my cell number is 605-593-1711. So link in description below with that, and I'll also link the Facebook group Veda if you have Facebook. And then just hit me up with questions. That's the big thing right there, is because there are a lot of unknowns, you know. But with that, let's go from phase 1 we talked about is voluntarily. Phase 2 is involuntarily. You're forced to retrain or separate, right? And phase 3 is basically open season, all others. That means that the one uniform career field, for whatever reason, could not find 100 people to retrain because of like medical reasons or family reasons or etc., right? So that allows people that do not have an objective out quota, let's say POL and prior POL, right? And that's 2FOX1. Let's say that as a master sergeant, it had 0 next to the objective out on the retraining advisory. I could still apply. But the only difference is that you have to have an exception to policy signed by your unit commander, and that goes up through AFPC and your CFM, and they kind of squash everything out to see if it's okay to release you or not. So with that said, there's really not much to talk about other than this is no BS coming, to reflect on what you want to be, like for real when you grow up, right? And do you have the credentials? Do you have the education? Do you have the certifications that's going to meet your why? So that way you don't feel like you're working a single day in your life, right? That is so crucially important. But with that, I just kind of want to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions about the one uniform specifically, or the retraining advisory, or what the road ahead, you name it. So I'll open it up real quick if anybody has anything, and I have all the time in the world, and I will hang back for you guys. Clear as mud. Yes, sir.
So one thing they brought up for leveling of our manning was DSD and removing the more or less restriction for our career field, which has been, for most of the length of the career field, been in place. So could you speak about DSD and the process?
Yeah. So he had mentioned DSDs being a option instead of retraining. So DSDs are totally different than retraining because you're not going from one AFSC to another. You are, but you come back, you know. And it still requires your career field manager to let you go. So I would imagine the idea for DSDs is that the issue with the 1U career field will work itself out in the matter of a period of 3 to maybe 4 years, hopefully. So that way, when your DSD is finished, you can come right back to the one uniform career field. And not only that, a DSD is phenomenal for your career, especially if you want to go for senior in chief. They're very important, right? So that's probably what they're aiming at. So now for DSDs, it's important to talk to your local leadership about that. They come down twice a year, spring and fall. And spring is already over, so the next ones you're going to see are fall. So basically just say to your supervisors what you want to do in a DSD, right? So that way they put you in the correct path. So SPECAT, S-P-E-C-A-T. So S-P-E-C-A-T. Find that on MIPERS. It's called SPECAT, and that lists every single DSD that's available, what it's about, how to apply for it, and you name it. That is the Air Force go-to for all DSDs.
Could you go over the link between Career Airman and NCORP and then First Term Airman and their retraining processes?
So his question was, what's the difference between First Term Airman retraining and NCORP retraining? They're totally different. First Term Airman retraining, you could have a career field to where you need 8,000 bodies, right? An objective in. And let's talk about like security forces a couple of years ago. They're like, yeah, nobody is leaving. And there's these rumors that go around. Aircraft maintenance is another one to where supervisors will tell First Term Airmen, like, you can't retrain, like, we need people. And that's totally false. It's your right to retrain as a First Term Airman. Nobody can tell you no. As a matter of fact, your chain doesn't even have to know. You just click the little button on MIPERS, and they say you're qualified or you are not. And if you are qualified, the list comes down, and you just start your checklist. It's awesome, right? In Corp, you have to go through your commander and get what's called an exception to policy signed, or you still have to go through your unit commander. Whereas First Term Airmen don't need to do that. And that's the most important difference right there. Now, as far as how everything flows and the semantics and the behind the scenes stuff, it's probably way too complicated and in-depth to talk about during this discussion with how they cross-flow. But at the end of the day, in a nutshell, it's just a career field manager talking to AFPC saying, I have too many people or I don't have enough. And then they publish that to the online retraining advisory. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, when it comes to the second part of NCORP where they're forcing people to retrain, is there like a standard process that AFPC uses to choose people that you're going to force to retrain, or does every career field kind of have their own process for that?
So his question is, when it comes to phase 2, is there a standardized process as far as a vetting process, right?
Yeah.
Who gets picked over who? So I'll tell you, when you are retraining normally, it's the best candidates, you know? But every situation is different, and I think they're probably going to look at time on station, and don't quote me on this, but they're probably going to look at time on station. They're going to look at your EPRs. They're going to look at, they're not going to go like super in depth and look at like decorations and go way, way back into your history or anything. And when I say EPRs, they're AC, LC, whatever. Like, what are those, right? So does a person have a security clearance that is inactive, or maybe it's incorrect or something. So the easiest way to get people with the least friction possible from a one uniform to whatever is what the Air Force is gonna do, right? The answer isn't clear cut per se, aside from how your records are looked at to be selected for just a typical retraining position, you know. So I would recommend looking the PSDG for retraining. And then there's also AFI 36, or I'm sorry, Air Force Manual 36-2100. If you go to chapter 6, that will talk about the retraining program. And that will talk to you about how things are kind of racked and stacked. So I would not take the chance of thinking about anything other than it could be me. You know what I mean? Don't take a chance on thinking that you might be safe. Because if 19 years in the military has taught me anything, is when you think you're safe, you're not safe. And then crazy stuff happens, and the next thing you know, you have to come up with a plan B, C, D, E. So if you come with that plan B, C, D, E now, you're going to be better equipped in case it does happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does that somewhat answer your question?
Yeah, it's just that, yeah, I was asking because we've had several briefings over this, and they'll tell us, like, if you're an instructor, you're more likely to be kept in the career field because it shows you're more important to the career field.
Right. I think a lot of that is going to be determined on your career field manager,
Okay.
what he or she wants. I can't answer that. I can answer the Air Force verbiage about it, but that would get downflowed through your career field manager. And you guys are such a small knit community that it would go straight to your senior chief here, and then they would talk to you about it, or it would come from you. Oh, okay. What's your rank, sir? You senior?
Chief.
Chief? Okay, yeah, that's how that would work. I mean, is that somewhat accurate?
Yep.
Am I not lying or anything?
Yeah, if not, just a direct line from Chief right up to me.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the great thing about when you have, especially a chief at flight level is freaking phenomenal. You guys are lucky to have that. A lot of career fields don't, you know, so they've been in a long time and they have those connections, right? So that is how it works. They pick up the phone and it's not like some colonel or whatever. It's like, oh, hey, what's going on, Jerry? You know what I mean? Because we've all been in for so damn long, you know, and then that's how you help your people out. It's the phone call. But they can't help you if you aren't talking to them and your supervisors about what your needs, wants, and desires are. We're not mind readers. None of us are, right? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So the phase 1 starts on Tuesday.
Right.
I was interested in cross-training. What is the process I would have to take? Where would I have to go?
That's a solid question. So his question is, if you do want to retrain, thank you for keeping me on track. So if you do want to retrain, first of all, reflect, right? Think about what your future self looks like in 10 years. Is this going to get you there, right? So, and if it's not, then to retrain, all you do is go to MyPers and click retraining. It's literally that easy. You go to MyPers, click retraining, it says apply to retrain. It is that simple. And then what happens is you go through an automated process. It's a vetting check. And the computer system is going to look at your records. They're going to look at your time in grade, time in service, all of that stuff. And it's going to automatically calculate via an algorithm if you are qualified or not. So here's what might happen, and this happens a lot, unfortunately, and I guess it's for the best, but it comes back to where you're not ineligible to retrain. Well, if you go to MyPers, on the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's a thing called incidents. You got to click on incidents up there, and then through there you'll have a drop-down list of all of the different questions that in departments within AFPC that you can talk to, and that will get you over to the Total Force Service Center to talk to an actual person at AFPC and say, hey, sir, ma'am, I tried to apply for retraining. The one uniform career field has 100 objective out quotas for staff sergeant, 60 for tech, I think it's 23 or 26 for master, and the computer told me no. What do I do, right? And then if you go that route, you also have the email traffic as well, and that's important, right? Because Total Force Service Center is basically a call center that works for AFPC, and you're talking to a contractor. You're not talking to someone in the military. And they answer your phone calls, and they follow these checklists and point you over to the right direction. So you got to think that AFPC handles tens of thousands of requests a month across their departments. So they have to have something like that to make sure the right question goes to the right department. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's just how I could start the process if I wish to do something else.
Right. You know, and also you have my cell phone number. Please, 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 please don't ever sit on a question. Shoot me a text. I will get back to you. I'm an idiot, so I still smoke. So I'll be out in my truck smoking a Virginia Slim 100 or a Pall Mall 100 dangling out of my lip, going through all my text messages of everybody that needs help, and I'm like boom, 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 and like 15 to 20 people, like within 30 minutes, I've answered their questions. I've already recorded the videos, and it's, for me, it's a very fluent system because I did all the work when I first started a career advisor in the expectation that I would get bombarded with questions, so that way I can funnel them over to things that I have already pre-recorded that they can learn about, right? And then if they have follow-up questions, they just shoot me a text. So that opens my door to where I don't have to spend an hour with one person every single meeting talking about something that should really take 10 minutes, right? And it opens my aperture to be able to help the entire wing and not just say, I want to help you, like no bullshit, like for real, be there and to help you, right? So please, please, please shoot me a text. I have the bandwidth. Once again, you can text me when I'm retired as long as the information is relevant. I'm still going to help you, right? So easy, up front, just go to MyPers and hit apply. Call me. I got you. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. What was that? You said you compiled all the information together. What was that, like, website or Facebook group, I think you said?
So it's called Veda. It'll also be in this video. I'm going to take this SD card. I'm going to edit it all out, make it pretty, and then add links in the video. And but if you go to Veteran Employment and Transition Alliance on Facebook, it's a Facebook group. And it's not just me. Now that there are thousands upon thousands upon, there's 27.5 thousand people in there, right? They also add stuff in there, like the file sections and you name it. So, my God, there is not a question that could not be answered in that group on how to retire, how to separate, who you need to talk to get a good job, networking, all this stuff that you would think of about TAPS, but multiply that by about 35,000. It's in that group. Cool. Yes, sir?
So phase 2 for NCORP is the first week of December, we've been told.
So it's supposed to be in February. Yeah, so they can change. AFPC and chiefs, they can do whatever the hell they want to do. Like, that's a real thing. And they're not just going to make that decision out of a vacuum. It's going to be based on of factors that are happening across Big Air Force, right? So things can be changed. That's why we have those PSDGs and that can say, hey, I need to change this in like 35 minutes, and they can be published versus an AFI or TO. So it's supposed to be like the first week of February, normally.
So if I elect not to cross-train for phase 1, and I get selected for phase 2, how would I be notified, and what are my options at that point?
Okay, so if you don't apply for phase 1 voluntary retraining, and you are involuntarily picked to retrain, you're going to get an email from AFPC. Hopefully that comes down from your chief, because, and I might even go back, I might ask too, like once it gets to that time frame, can I get the numbers please from, I probably don't need to do that because you probably have a way better line of communication with the CFM than what I ever would, but they can say, here's your numbers, you know, and I don't know if they would go by name per se, but I can tell you that if you are picked, you're going to get notification, you're going to get an email, and you're going to have X amount of time to start some kind of a retraining application process, if that makes sense, right? So that's kind of why I was invited to come in and talk about this, is to expect the unexpected, because you just never know. The people in vehicle maintenance had no idea, and every single one of those tech sergeants was involuntarily retrained. It was nuts. Make sense?
So it was initially described that why we have you here. You would get notification, you get a job that was picked for you,
Right,
or
so
a separation button.
you're-
It doesn't seem quite like what you were talking about earlier.
Right, so you're going to get notification, and you're going to be able, and then from that point forward, it's a normal retraining process. You'll be allowed up to 5 AFSCs, and it's going to go off of your ASVAB score and what is open.
If at phase 2 you elect not to retrain, what's the timeline for separation?
Right, so you have an option to retrain or to separate. If you, and you'll have to sign what's called a 964, and you'll have to get counseling with me to say you have up to 6 months, right? So if you don't retrain, you have up to 6 months to separate from the Air Force, and it's not bad. You're not getting anything bad for that. Would that be considered like an admin discharge, or would it still be honorable? Or
Yeah, just, it should be an admin set.
right. So it's like a normal separation. It's just that the Air Force is in a position to where they had no choice but to make you do something, and versus make you go through that and be absolutely miserable, they give you the option to separate, which I think is actually pretty great, especially for first term airmen. For you guys that have been in a little while, you're way more invested. It doesn't make sense to do that, but that option is on the table, and that will all be included in the initial notification. So if you get that notification, please, please, please come talk to me. Talk to your chief.
Can you go over the timeline for when someone either volunteers to retrain or they are involuntarily told to retrain, from that time to when they go to their new tech school
Okay.
or that kind of thing?
Right. So Chief's question was, what is the timeline? From what I've seen in my experience is the list, let's say the list drops, and we'll keep this fresh, right? So the list drops next week, and you apply to retrain, and this process timeline is the same for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and first term airman retraining. So we'll just talk about what it takes cradle to grave, right? So you send an email to MyPers, they say you are eligible. You're eligible for 1 of 5 AFSCs or 5 of 5 AFSCs. And there's a checklist that is connected via email, right, under each one of those AFSCs. For example, you're always going to have to go to flight medicine and do a 422. And then if you don't have a security clearance, like you guys don't have to worry about that, but some people have to get a TS, right? And depending on how broad that checklist is going to depend on how long it's going to take for you to run around base and to get everything done. And a lot of it's going to depend on your drive. I've seen people knock out these really long checklists in 3 weeks to a month. They're on point. You know what I mean? And then I've seen other people that have like really easy stuff that takes them 3-4 months, you know? So some of it is dependent on you and it varies. However, I will say that it can absolutely be done realistically 2.5 months to get everything done, submitted back to AFPC. And what's going to happen is that a retraining board is going to happen at the end of the month, right? So a retraining board, it's a computer. So this happens on the last day of every single month. Should I pause? Okay. So the board is going to happen and it's going to pick if you were selected or not. So if you submitted all your documents on 15 October 2022, then 30 or 31 October is when your records will be considered. And you have 3 chances. So if it doesn't meet the first board, or if it meets the first board and you don't get selected, you go to the second board, which is going to be at the end of November. And if you don't get selected, it goes to December. If you don't get selected, then your retraining opportunity has basically been used up. In your guys' case, that's not going to be the case. The Air Force will find something for you because of how overmanned the one uniform career field is. So from the very beginning to the time you are out processing Ellsworth Air Force Base to go to your new assignment is probably, could be anywhere, I would say from what I have seen, 5 to 8 months, sometimes longer. Sometimes there are short notice that are 3 and 4 months because maybe somebody dropped out of a class, right? and there's been somebody waiting. But ideally, the average from what I've seen, like 5 to 8 months. Any other questions?
Yeah. So when I was enlisted as a first term airman, I was a 6-year enlistee, and then I did 2 extensions on top of that to all the way to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Am I technically still a first term airman for that whole 10 years? Because there's a 0 quota, and I know I'm going to get asked that question. Like, if you're in an extension, are you still a first term airman?
Don't re-enlist. So you are still a first term airman. Now you're not in your window anymore,
Right, but you're safe from getting forced retrain.
technically.
Okay.
It's pretty cut and dry. You know, if the Air Force is a business and I have too many employees, and this business isn't getting the ROI that it needs out of X amount of employees, then it only makes sense to use your employees cross-functionally in the different AFSCs where you can get ROI. It makes perfect business sense. It is clear as day, you know. And I think it's important that regardless of what happens, if you stick this out and you do your 20 years, you're set for life, honest to God. Even if you retire as a staff sergeant, who cares? You're set, and you still have a whole freaking life ahead of you. Just do your homework right now, get plugged in, start networking with the people that you want to work with once this ends. Cool? All right, I know you guys are knights, so I'll stick around, but that's all I have. Thank you guys for allowing me to come out and talk about this, and don't hold anything in. If this is stressing you out or you need someone to talk to, you can call me anytime. I got you. And I know that your leadership does as well, so please don't bottle it up. Don't bottle it in. There's no such thing as a stupid question. This is not a typical thing that happens, right? I've been here a long time, and this is only the 2nd or 3rd time that I've seen it in such a crazy case like this, per se, right? So don't bottle this stuff in, because this is your life we're talking about. Cool? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys.